Here's an example of what we've come to expect when we think of architectural photography. Tim Griffith is one of the best architectural photographers working today. And this is the federal building in San Francisco, designed by Tom Main and Morphosis Architects. And there are a few characteristics that jump out at me. One is that it's taken from from ground level, and it has a foreground, people and cars, street life, a middle ground, which is the building itself, and a background. We see the buildings that surround it. We have an understanding of its context as a result. There is sunlight on only parts of it, which help give it a more three-dimensional feel. But we don't look at most architectural photography one image at a time. We create stories, the stories of the buildings. And we do that for people generally who can't get to the buildings. Here we see in another angle, taken from about 3 or 4 stories up, the courtyard in front of the building. We also see the various components of the building. And this adds to our understanding of the architecture. In addition to those views, we also see a vignette. Tim Griffith is a master at making vignettes or details. They show us various components of the architecture in greater detail, but also he shows us what they look like from different perspectives and under different lighting conditions. Here he's also added the element of traffic going by, which is a nice counterpoint to the architecture, but also helps in conveying the fact that the building is right on the street. Not all architectural photography is made with the intention of merely documenting it. Andreas Gursky, a German photographer, is primarily a fine artist who uses photography as his medium. And in images like the one here, he does a lot of Photoshop work, in this case taking a number of exposures with people in different areas of the building, and then draws from those various exposures, adding people in so that the final product has a lot more pedestrian traffic than it would actually normally have. This is by Edward Bertinsky, a Canadian photographer who is interested in social issues and environmental issues. This is a factory in China, and sees architecture in a very different way than a lot of traditional architectural photographers do. This is typical of the kind of photography that we see in most shelter publications. It's relatively direct, well lit, but the lighting does not draw attention to itself. It's really about the space and the objects in it. And the objective is to convey what it's like to be in that space without actually being able to go to the space. Here's a picture of a house within a context, and although it's rather small in the frame, it's because it's absolutely dead center, and there's great contrast between it and its surroundings. It still dominates our attention. Nice bonus that it has a beautiful reflection in the water as well. From the very beginning, architectural photography has utilized architecture as subject matter. This is the oldest known photograph, made by Nicéphore Niepce in France in 1826. And it's a view out of the window of his house in the countryside, with various other structures in the middle ground, and on the left you can see the open window that he had trained his camera out. This is an all-day exposure. He started by opening the lens first thing in the morning, and then covering it up again at the end of the day. And as a result, we have light on facing walls from the sun. This is actually an enhancement, believe it or not, of the original, which actually looks like this. So the image is really delicate, very difficult to see, but was the starting point for all photography. It would be another 13 years before photographic processes would go public. And Louis Daguerre in France was one of the two inventors of photography after Niepce, who finally took his invention public. Daguerreotypes are made on glass plates. They're one of a kind. They could not be reproduced. And this is actually an example of Daguerre's earlier work. He was a set designer and illustrator, and already had a high sense of aesthetic going into photography. This is a vignette that he created and photographed in the mid-1830s, and is already quite sophisticated visually. This is a view out of his studio in Paris, and it's I think a really nice cityscape. But this particular image is noteworthy for another reason. It's the first photograph taken of actual human beings. If you look carefully down in the left-hand corner, there is a man getting his shoes shined. So the man getting shoe shine and the shoe shine, the first two people to be photographed. And here we see it in detail. Unfortunately, not a very clear detail, but I think you get the idea.